Welcome back, friends, and thank you for joining me again. Tonight, we'll step together into the world of medieval life, exploring the art of armored combat, the discipline of knights, and the quiet lessons of vigilance and preparation that shaped communities in those times. So settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let's journey back to a world where skill, courage, and careful observation meant the difference between survival and chaos. The wind carried a chill that morning across the rolling hills of Northumbria, rustling through the bare branches of trees that had long shed their leaves. Smoke rose from the chimneys of scattered cottages, curling into the gray sky, and the river that cut through the valley reflected the pale light of a hesitant sun. In one such cottage lived Edric, a man of no noble birth, yet known throughout the villages along the river for his skill with sword and shield. He was lame, with weathered hands and a steady gaze, the kind of gaze that suggested a mind sharpened by both observation and experience. His armor, patched in places with leather and riveted iron, sat in the corner of the room not as decoration, but as the worn and trusted companion of many battles. Edric had been born into a modest farming family, but the call of the sword had drawn him from plowing fields to training in the local hall. He had learned the weight of a sword in his hands, the rhythm of a shield against an opponent's strike, and the discipline required to endure long hours of training in cold and rain. In the evenings, when the work of the day was done, he would sit by the hearth, polishing his weapons, thinking of battles past and of those that might yet come. Despite his skill, Edric remained humble, aware that fortune favored not only strength, but cunning and the ability to endure hardship without complaint. One afternoon, as Edric walked the narrow path along the river, a messenger approached, riding hard and calling out his name. The young man's horse was frothing at the mouth, sweat dripping from its flanks, and the rider's face was pale beneath the hood. "Edric," he panted, "there is trouble at Blackwood Keep. Raiders from the north have struck the outer villages. They took livestock, torched homes, and now march toward the keep itself. The Lord requests your presence. He trusts your skill." Edric felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Blackwood Keep was not far, perched atop a hill with walls of stone that had withstood many assaults. Yet he knew that the effectiveness of even the strongest walls depended on the men within them. Without hesitation, he mounted his horse and urged it forward, the rhythm of hooves against the dirt path carrying him toward the unknown that awaited. Upon arrival, the keep was a scene of measured urgency. Archers lined the battlements, their eyes scanning the horizon, and blacksmiths worked feverishly to sharpen blades and mend armor. The Lord, a man of stern expression and lined features, greeted Edric with a nod. "We are told you are steady with blade and shield," he said. "I have little time, but the northern raiders will test these walls. We must be ready." Edric spent that night walking the battlements, observing the defenses, inspecting the placement of archers, and examining the gate, which was reinforced with iron bands yet had shown signs of wear. He could see the faint traces of footprints along the riverbank, the scattered tracks of raiders who had already passed through nearby hamlets. Each detail mattered, each piece of observation a thread in the larger tapestry of defense. Morning came with a sky painted in hues of gray and pink. Edric took his position near the gate, shield raised, sword ready. The raiders arrived in force, a dark line moving steadily through the valley. Their banners flapped in the wind, and the clamor of their approach carried across the hills. They were a mix of hardened warriors and younger men, driven by hunger, opportunity, and the thrill of chaos. Edric watched, assessing their formation, noting the gaps and weaknesses that might be exploited. The first clash was sudden. A group of raiders reached the outer fence, attempting to break through with axes and crude battering tools. Edric met them with measured strikes, each motion precise, his shield absorbing blows that might have crushed a lesser man. Around him, the defenders moved with practiced coordination, and the sound of metal striking metal filled the air, ringing against stone walls and the tension that hung thick in the morning. Hours passed in this relentless rhythm. Edric moved among the defenders, encouraging the archers, reinforcing weaker points along the walls, and joining the melee whenever the raiders pressed too close. The battle was not won in heroic flourishes, but in steady persistence, in the endurance of each man and woman who refused to yield. Sweat and blood mingled on faces, and the air carried the metallic tang of iron, the smoke of torches, and the cries of those wounded. At the height of the struggle, a breach appeared near the gate. A section of wall had weakened over time, and the raiders poured through, forcing a direct confrontation. Edric met them without hesitation. He moved with a rhythm born of countless hours of practice, parrying, striking, stepping aside, and reading the intentions of his opponents as one might read the flow of a river. The sounds of battle became almost meditative, a cadence of survival where every motion had weight and consequence. Yet even as he fought, Edric saw a young page cornered by two raiders near the courtyard. Without a second thought, he sprinted across the open ground, shield raised, deflecting blows aimed at him, and struck the raiders with a precision that left them unable to continue. The boy stumbled, wide-eyed and trembling, but unhurt. Edric guided him to safety, then turned back to the pressing wave of attackers. The battle wavered as the sun climbed, casting long shadows across the stone walls. The raiders, seeing the determination and coordination of the defenders, began to falter. Some retreated, others were captured, and the tide slowly shifted. By evening, the ground around Blackwood Keep was littered with discarded weapons, broken siege tools, and the evidence of the fight that had tested the mettle of all within the walls. In the quiet that followed, Edric walked the battlements once more. The air was still, the distant cries of birds echoing through the hills. And the keep stood intact, a testament to preparation, courage, and the persistence of those who refused to yield. The Lord approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You have done more than hold the walls," he said. "You have inspired those within them. For that I am grateful." Edric did not reply immediately. He looked across the valley, toward the villages that had been threatened, and felt the weight of responsibility that came with skill. Strength and courage mattered, but so did wisdom, observation, and the ability to act decisively when the moment demanded it. In that quiet reflection, he understood the essence of a life spent mastering combat not for glory, but for protection, not for honor alone, but for the preservation of life and community. Night fell over Blackwood Keep, stars emerging one by one in the cold sky. Fires burned in hearths, and the survivors tended to the wounded, repairing armor and sharing food in the flickering light. Edric cleaned his weapons, laid his armor aside, and allowed himself a brief moment of rest, knowing that vigilance would always be required, yet comfort could be found in the knowledge that today, skill and perseverance had made the difference between survival and loss. The village below, once threatened and fearful, now moved with cautious relief. Children ran through the remaining open fields, villagers repaired fences and homes, and the rhythm of life resumed, marked by the enduring lessons of courage, coordination, and calm authority. Edric, watching from the battlements, felt the quiet satisfaction that comes not from glory or recognition, but from the knowledge that he had done what he was trained and prepared to do. The sword and shield had served their purpose, yet it was the careful observation, patient endurance, and steady mind that had truly saved the day. The sun set, painting the keep in a warm glow against the encroaching night. Edric turned to descend the stairs, the sounds of evening carrying softly on the wind. He knew that there would be other battles, other threats, yet for now there was peace, hard-earned and tangible. And in that moment, standing amidst the stones and torches, he understood that the life of a defender was not about the splendor of combat, but the quiet, unwavering commitment to those who relied upon him, the rhythm of survival, and the enduring presence of courage in the face of uncertainty. The following morning arrived with a crisp chill, the kind that made breath visible in the air and encouraged the villagers to huddle closer to their hearths. Edric moved through the courtyard, observing the work of repair. Broken gates had been reinforced, splintered timbers replaced, and archers practiced once more along the walls, their arrows striking targets with renewed precision. The battle had left its mark. Yet it had also revealed strength that the defenders had perhaps not fully recognized in themselves. Edric found himself called to the Lord's Hall, where a small council had gathered to discuss the future. The Lord, still bearing the fatigue of command, gestured for Edric to sit. "We cannot rely solely on our courage," he said. "These raiders will test us again, perhaps sooner than we expect. Your insight is needed. How can we strengthen both the keep and the surrounding villages?" Edric studied the map spread across the table, tracing the river, the hills, and the paths that raiders had taken. He spoke carefully, suggesting patrols along likely routes, watch posts on the hills, and training for villagers in the use of basic weapons. He emphasized coordination over bravado, the importance of early warning, and the placement of supplies for both defense and recovery. The Lord listened, nodding thoughtfully, understanding that preparedness was as critical as courage in facing the unpredictable threats of their world. As the day progressed, Edric moved among the villagers, sharing advice and demonstrating techniques. He showed farmers how to reinforce doors and windows, how to set small alarms using bells or hanging pots that would alert them to intruders, and how to organize small groups for quick response. He spoke to women and children, not only instructing but encouraging, showing that knowledge and practice could reduce fear and strengthen confidence. There was a sense of quiet empowerment, the kind that comes when people understand that their survival depends not only on strength, but on skill, observation, and cooperation. Evening came, and Edric took his place once more on the battlements. The sun had set behind distant hills, casting long shadows over the village and the river. And the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. A gentle wind carried the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, a reminder that life persisted in its ordinary rhythms even after the extraordinary pressures of battle. Edric leaned against the stone wall, considering the fragility of the world around him and the resilience of those who chose to meet it with calm determination rather than fear. In the nights that followed, there were reports of raiders in the distance, small bands testing the outer villages, but none approached the keep itself. Edric and the defenders remained vigilant, maintaining patrols, practicing drills, and ensuring that the villagers knew both what to expect and how to respond. The months passed with a rhythm of careful watchfulness, a balance of preparation, observation, and the occasional confrontation that tested their readiness without overwhelming them. Through this period, Edric came to understand more deeply the interplay between knowledge and action. Combat was not merely about the moment of striking or blocking, but about foresight, planning, and the ability to read patterns and intentions. He observed that those who relied solely on brute strength or instinct often faltered, while those who combined skill, careful preparation, and calm presence endured and influenced outcomes. By midsummer, the keep and surrounding villages had become a model of readiness. Watch posts dotted the hills, signals could be raised to communicate rapidly across distances, and villagers moved with confidence through the fields and lanes, aware of potential danger but not paralyzed by it. Edric continued to train with them, refining techniques, correcting errors, and demonstrating that the rhythm of combat, when understood and respected, could coexist with the rhythms of daily life. One afternoon, as he walked along the riverbank, Edric encountered a group of children practicing with wooden swords and shields. He watched quietly, seeing the careful mimicry of techniques he had taught them, and a smile crept across his face. These small acts, seemingly insignificant, were the foundation of enduring strength. By imparting knowledge, by cultivating skill and observation, he was shaping a generation capable of facing danger with both courage and prudence. The quiet evenings brought their own reflections. Edric would sit by the hearth, sharpening blades, polishing armor, and listening to the distant sounds of life in the village. He thought often of those he had faced in battle, the raiders who had tested the walls and the people, and of the moments when quick thinking, steady hands, and calm presence had turned the tide. It was not always the flash of heroism that mattered, he realized, but the accumulation of steady, deliberate actions taken in the right measure and at the right moment. Winter returned, harsher than before, and with it the work of maintaining both the keep and the villagers' defenses. Snow drifted across the hills, covering the ground in white, and rivers froze along their edges. Edric and the defenders continued their patrols, often trudging through deep snow, testing gates, reinforcing fences, and keeping watch for any sign of intrusion. The rhythm of vigilance became almost meditative, a pattern that instilled both caution and confidence in the community. As the season passed, Edric came to understand the deeper lessons of his life as a defender. Strength alone was insufficient, skill and endurance were vital, yet the heart of true protection lay in observation, planning, and teaching others to act with awareness. Courage was important, yes, but so was patience, humility, and the recognition that even small, deliberate actions could prevent disaster and save lives. In the spring, the river thawed and the village stirred with new energy. Crops were planted, animals tended, and life moved forward with cautious optimism. Edric watched from the battlements, reflecting on the months that had passed, on the battles fought and avoided, and on the resilience of people who had learned that survival depended not only on the walls around them, but on the knowledge and preparation within them. The Lord approached him once more, a rare smile softening his otherwise stern features. "You have changed more than the walls," he said. "You have changed the people. They will not forget it, nor will I." Edric nodded, knowing that the work was ongoing, never finished, yet deeply meaningful. His place was not at the center of glory, but at the center of preparation, observation, and calm action. As night fell over Blackwood Keep, fires glimmering warmly within, Edric descended from the battlements and returned to his small chamber. The world outside continued in its rhythms of labor, care, and occasional danger, yet within him there was a quiet satisfaction, a deep awareness that the combination of skill, patience, and steadfastness had made a tangible difference. The sword had served its purpose, the shield had protected, but it was the steady mind and careful observation that had truly preserved life and order in a world shaped by uncertainty and challenge. Spring gave way to summer, and with the warmth of longer days, Blackwood Keep thrummed with life once more. Fields were planted in neat rows, livestock grazed under the watchful eyes of villagers, and children ran freely along paths that had only months before been tense with fear. Edric found a quiet satisfaction in this renewal, a proof that preparation and vigilance had preserved more than stone and timber. They had safeguarded the fragile pulse of everyday life. Yet even in these moments of calm, Edric remained watchful. He moved among the villagers, not as a commander or master, but as a teacher and observer. He instructed young men in the finer points of swordsmanship, showing them how to balance reach with defense, and how to anticipate an opponent's movement rather than simply meeting force with force. He spoke to women and older villagers, guiding them in practical measures of defense and in the small techniques that could tip the balance of survival in unexpected encounters. In all these interactions, he emphasized patience, attention, and adaptability, the same traits that had carried him through the fiercest hours of battle. One afternoon, a messenger arrived bearing news from a neighboring keep. A band of raiders, larger than any seen in months, had been sighted moving south, and local lords were preparing to mount a joint defense. Edric rode immediately to the gathering point, joining knights and men-at-arms from surrounding regions. He observed their formations, noting both strengths and weaknesses, and offered advice on integrating the smaller, less experienced units with the hardened warriors. The approach was methodical, almost ceremonial in its attention to detail, yet every suggestion had the weight of experience behind it. The following days were filled with drilling, coordination, and preparation. Edric watched how fear could undermine even the strongest of men, and how confidence, rooted in knowledge and practice, could turn potential panic into disciplined action. In one instance, a group of farmers, nervous and inexperienced, faltered in their lines. Edric moved among them, calm and deliberate, demonstrating positions, explaining why each movement mattered, and guiding them until their motions became instinctive. The transformation was subtle but powerful. When the raiders finally arrived, the encounter was less a chaotic clash than a carefully choreographed contest of endurance, observation, and decisive action. Edric fought not at the front alone, but in a position where he could support, guide, and inspire. His strikes were measured, his parries precise, and his presence became a stabilizing force amid the disorder of combat. The raiders pressed hard at first, but the coordination of the defenders, informed by his guidance, gradually forced them to withdraw. After the engagement, the survivors of the raiders were tended to, their wounds treated, and prisoners secured. Edric spoke with the Lord and fellow commanders about lessons learned, the importance of continuous training, the need for vigilance even in calm periods, and the understanding that survival depended not solely on brute strength, but on observation, planning, and shared responsibility. The discussions were not boastful or celebratory. They were practical and forward-looking. an acknowledgement that the patterns of life and conflict demanded preparation as much as courage. In the quiet that followed, Edric returned to Blackwood Keep, observing the villages along the river with a thoughtful eye. He saw how the people moved with a new confidence, how they tended their fields and flocks, and how they shared knowledge between families and neighbors. These were the small, enduring victories, the proof that education, vigilance, and careful action mattered as much as any sword or shield. Evenings became moments of reflection. Edric would sit by the hearth, listening to the distant song of the river and the soft murmur of life around him. He polished his weapons not as an act of vanity, but as a ritual that connected him to skill, discipline, and the rhythm of readiness. The stone walls of the keep, solid and enduring, mirrored the structure he sought to build in the people themselves, a foundation of knowledge, resilience, and calm determination. Months passed, seasons shifted, and the once fragile village grew stronger, more confident in its capacity to endure both the ordinary challenges of life and the extraordinary disruptions of conflict. Edric continued his work quietly, observing, teaching, and guiding, never seeking acclaim, yet shaping outcomes with a steady hand and mind. He understood now that true protection was not a matter of heroic deeds alone, but of preparation, patience, and the careful cultivation of skill in oneself and in others. By the following spring, Blackwood Keep and its surrounding villages had become a model of defense and resilience. Travelers spoke of the coordination and readiness of its people, of the quiet authority and skill of Edric, and of the subtle balance between courage and careful observation that had preserved life in a world prone to chaos. One evening, as the sun dipped behind distant hills, casting the keep in warm amber light, Edric walked the battlements for the last time that day. Children laughed in the village below, women carried water from the river with ease, and men practiced drills in the fading light. The keep stood as it had before, a silent witness to the passage of time and to the lives it had protected. Edric paused, considering the journey that had brought him here, from a young man drawn to the sword, through battles and long nights of vigilance, to the quiet authority he now held in shaping both defense and community. The rhythm of combat, the lessons of observation, the endurance required to meet uncertainty without faltering, all these had converged in a life lived with purpose and awareness. As darkness settled, fires glimmering softly within cottages and the keep itself, Edric descended from the battlements. He knew that life would continue in its rhythms of work, care, and occasional threat. Yet he also knew that the people, strengthened by knowledge, practice, and steady guidance, could face those rhythms with confidence. The sword and shield had their place, but it was the steady mind, the patient observation, and the quiet teaching that had left the most lasting mark. Sitting by the hearth in his small chamber, Edric allowed himself a rare moment of rest. The world outside moved in its persistent rhythms, yet inside him there was a profound satisfaction. He had served not for glory or recognition, but for the enduring safety and confidence of those around him. In that calm and measured reflection, he understood the true legacy of a life spent in defense, not in the tales of battle alone, but in the quiet, lasting imprint of skill, wisdom, and steadfast care upon a community prepared to meet whatever might come. And so the night settled over Blackwood Keep, peaceful and enduring, a testament to vigilance, preparation, and the enduring courage found not only in arms, but in observation, learning, and the steady, patient acts of those who understand that survival is both art and practice, discipline and compassion. The walls remained strong, the people vigilant, and the lessons of those who had faced chaos without yielding became woven into the very rhythm of daily life, a quiet inheritance for generations to come. Years passed quietly, each season layering upon the last, and Edric began to see the fruits of his labor in ways more subtle than the absence of raids or the sturdy walls of Blackwood Keep. The villagers moved with an ease and confidence that had been absent before, carrying themselves with the knowledge that their actions could shape outcomes, that foresight mattered as much as courage. Fields thrived, children played safely near the riverbanks, and the hum of everyday life became a kind of song, steady and reassuring. Edric found satisfaction in simple routines. Each morning he walked along the walls, inspecting the battlements, the gates, and the watch posts. Each afternoon he taught, whether with sword and shield or through instruction in tactics, observation, and situational awareness. He observed not only the physical readiness of the people, but also the confidence in their eyes, the confidence that arises when knowledge is shared, when skills are practiced, and when communities feel prepared for the uncertainty of the world around them. One day a young squire approached Edric with a question that had lingered on his mind. "Master," he asked, "why do we practice so much? Why not only fight when danger comes?" Edric smiled, setting down the wooden sword he had been using to demonstrate a stance. "Because," he said slowly, "the moment of danger is fleeting, but what carries you through it is everything you have learned before. You cannot wait until the enemy stands at your door to hope you know what to do. Strength without practice is like a bow without string. It cannot serve you when it matters most." The squire nodded thoughtfully, and Edric realized that these quiet lessons, these shared moments of understanding, were as critical as any battle. Through years of vigilance, training, and careful observation, the people of Blackwood had absorbed a knowledge that was invisible to those outside the keep, a knowledge that would endure long after he was gone. News came occasionally from neighboring lands, tales of conflicts and raids, some small, some devastating. Edric studied each report carefully, noting patterns, observing strategies, and considering implications. His advice was sought not only for immediate defense, but for building systems of preparedness that could carry communities through unpredictable challenges. Over time, his reputation became one of quiet authority and measured insight, valued not for dramatic heroism, but for the consistent wisdom that had preserved lives and strengthened communities. As the years accumulated, Edric also observed the changes within himself. Youthful urgency gave way to tempered patience, and the sharp edge of impulse was replaced by the calm precision of experience. He understood that leadership was not always loud or dramatic, that influence often worked quietly through teaching, demonstration, and the steady presence of someone who could see clearly, act decisively, and share knowledge without arrogance. In the evenings, he would sometimes wander through the village, watching families settle by fires, hearing the laughter of children, and noting the simple rhythms of domestic life. He saw how small lessons in vigilance, observation, and coordination had become second nature, how people moved with confidence in tasks that once would have seemed perilous or overwhelming. The keep, the fields, the workshops, and the river all carried signs of resilience, as if the lessons of preparation had taken root in the very fabric of daily life. When Edric finally decided to step away from active defense, it was not a moment of dramatic farewell. Instead, it was a quiet passing of responsibility, an acknowledgement that the community had grown capable of sustaining itself. Young leaders took up positions of authority, guided by the training and observation that Edric had nurtured for decades. Patrols continued, drills were practiced, and watch posts remained vigilant, but the people no longer relied solely on a single hand or mind. They had internalized the lessons, and in doing so, become guardians of their own lives. Edric retired to a small chamber within the keep, overlooking the river. He spent time reflecting on the long years, on battles fought and avoided, on nights of vigilance and days of instruction, and on the countless subtle acts that had in aggregate ensured survival and resilience. He understood that the story of defense, of combat, and of preparation was never merely about dramatic clashes, but about the cumulative effect of steady effort, careful observation, and the quiet sharing of skill and wisdom. Even in retirement, he observed, guided, and occasionally corrected, but he did so with a sense of release and satisfaction. He had built more than walls. He had cultivated a community capable of responding to danger without fear, of acting with coordination, and of protecting one another. The lessons would endure in the patterns of daily life, the rhythm of work and vigilance, and the shared understanding that survival and strength were as much about thought and preparation as about the sword and shield. In the evenings, Edric often sat by the river, listening to the soft murmur of water over stones, the distant song of birds, and the gentle sounds of village life. He reflected on the nature of courage, observation, and the quiet endurance required to protect what mattered most. He understood that heroism could take many forms, that sometimes the greatest victories were those that left no marks in the annals of battle, but were measured in lives preserved, confidence nurtured, and knowledge shared. The keep itself, now weathered by years yet still sturdy, stood as a testament not only to stone and timber, but to the discipline, care, and vigilance of those who lived within it. Children ran through its courtyards, elders moved through its halls with confidence, and families carried on in rhythms of work and rest, fortified by the invisible lessons of preparation and observation. As night settled once more, fires glowing warmly in cottages, Edric leaned back in his chair, feeling the quiet weight and satisfaction of a life spent in service, not for glory, but for enduring security. Outside, the river reflected the stars, steady and untroubled, a mirror of the calm vigilance that had come to define both the keep and its people. He understood that the story of defense, of life lived in preparation and awareness, would continue long after he was gone, woven into the daily practices, shared knowledge, and quiet confidence of generations to come. And so Blackwood Keep endured, not as a monument to a single man, but as a living testament to patience, skill, and the steady cultivation of resilience. The walls and battlements were strong, yes, but stronger still was the community they enclosed, the people who had learned through observation, practice, and calm courage that true strength resides as much in knowledge and preparedness as in the clash of steel. The years passed, peaceful and measured, and Edric, sitting by the river in the soft glow of evening, knew that his life's work had not been in vain. The keep, the villagers, and the lessons he had imparted formed a legacy far more enduring than any tale of battle. In the quiet, steady rhythm of life preserved, he found satisfaction, contentment, and a sense of fulfillment that no victory in combat alone could ever provide.